What were those bugs? Those were graphics row bugs. Are they bugs in version 12 or are they bugs in existing versions?
It's hard for me to say exactly because I don't think I had all the functions that you were using some ragged number or something or other.
Well, if there's a function you don't have, let me send it to you.
Okay.
Please, yeah, they're functions that should be in the function repository. I don't think I was using that ragged what's it plot. But the basic point here is graphics row. What I was looking at was a graphics row of different shaped objects, right?
Right.
So let's
they weren't stretching vertically.
That's correct, which is wrong, right? Graphics row should have, so let's generate, if I just say graphics of rectangle and then aspect ratio, let's say arrow, random real, let's say, what should we say? 0.1 to 4, let's say.
Extreme, but not so much so.
Okay, so let's say 5 of those. Okay, so now let's say graphics row of that. Okay, that's just wrong, isn't it? I mean, isn't that why is it leaving extra space there?
And this is a prototype build, correct?
No, this is the head branch. But let's try, I mean, let's look here at the regular version 11.3 behavior.
Well, no, I mean, that is the 11.3 behavior because it's still in proto.
Okay, well, okay, so let's look at this. So that's just wrong. It's not what the documentation says it should do. Because if you look at what row does here, right? See, it's tight. It doesn't have that equalization at all. Get what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. I completely agree that, you know.
And graphics row is supposed to match heights. Now, it could have an option that to not match heights, but right now, it's now, is there a prototype? Is it different in the prototype build?
Oh yeah, it probably issues messages, and it gives you something that's taller. That's not. I think it's still not matching heights, which
Okay,
I'm looking into.
So that's wrong, right? So, okay, hold on. Oops, what is going on here? It froze in sign in. Let's see. This prototype. Let's just try this here. Okay, but let's just make sure we agree on what it should be doing, right? Okay, so first point, like row, I believe it should be tight, horizontally. Yes?
Okay, or at least relatively tight. Perhaps not absolutely tight.
Well, I think it should do what row does. That is, I think it has a second argument, doesn't it? That gives the spacing information.
Right, and graphics row has an option that does this.
No, but graphics row should behave just like.
Wait. Let's back up a second. Row has nothing to do with grids.
No, I understand. But row, look, this has a spacing here, right? That's exactly what it should be doing. Okay. So the issue is,
okay, it tells you how often I look at the usage statement.
Yeah, well,
because it also has that spacings option.
Horizontal and vertical spacings. Well, that's probably a documentation bug, because that's really for a grid. That probably shouldn't be there for graphics row. Okay, but the thing that we're not dealing with here, right, is there are two cases. One, let's see, it doesn't really say here what. Okay, so the idea that it's equalizing horizontal size is just completely wrong. There is an option to grid to do that, which I think we could support here. I think it's some kind of equal sizes option. Right?
Well, I mean, graphics grid attempts to do this already, where it tries to match the aspect ratios to things. Okay, I don't know that it necessarily does it well.
Okay, what is the option to grid, which this doesn't appear to have? Okay, so here, let's take a look at what this does if we say graphics grid of list and then %11. Same thing, okay?
I would be very surprised if they weren't.
Okay, so now the question is, yeah, I mean, there's just a lot of stuff that's wrong here.
I mean, if I, I'm happy to change graphics grid.
Well, it could break things to do that.
I mean, that's the thing is.
Okay, so we need to actually be careful and do this design carefully. I
right.
think
so, go ahead.
But we're not really dramatic. We're not really doing that development now, Stephen.
Well, we need to fix the bugs here. We need to fix these bugs without question.
No, but what I'm saying is that if it has a long tail, that itself means a problem.
I understand, but we need to try to fix the existing bugs. So we need to understand what it should be doing, right?
And when was the bug introduced? If it's
I haven't a clue.
Oh, probably version 6.
But then it's by design.
Look, what it's doing is wrong, and it needs to be fixed.
Okay, but then it was never correct.
Look, what is this? How did it manage to get that shape there? You see what I'm saying? How did it manage to expand that aspect ratio? It even says in the documentation that the things are independently resizable, right? So that thing, see that bounding box? See that? How did it go from that bounding box?
Do we even know who did this?
To that bounding box?
Do we even know who developed this?
Yes. It was Covis.
Covis.
No, that was graphics. That was graphics grid. That was a different thing.
No. That was graphics row is a special case of graphics grid.
It wasn't supposed to be. I mean, I remember that discussion. I remember in some bizarre deja vu because I can't remember any. I remember having.
But it was Covis working with you, Stephen. Is that correct?
I guess the graphics grid optimization code, yes. But not this, not graphics row. Graphics row should have been fixed separately because graphics row does not have the same issues as graphics grid.
If that was the intention, then it was lost at some point. I don't think I was ever aware of it.
Okay, well, let's go through what it should do, okay?
Happily.
Okay, so graphics row obviously doesn't have the same issues as graphics grid. Graphics grid is trying to tightly pack. So if we take, let's go ahead and do this. Let's go ahead and take an example of what this is trying to do, okay? So let's say we make a 5x5 array here. Whoops, that's not what I want to do. I want to say comma 5 there. Okay, and now I want to say graphics grid of that. Okay, now what that did, in fact, not completely stupidly here, is solve the two-way constraint problem. Do you see what I'm saying? Roger, you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, it's just maxes out in every dimension.
No, that's not correct. No, because these could be of any size.
I know.
See what I'm saying?
But it takes.
I mean, it scales until it hits an edge.
Yeah, it takes the max height for each row.
No, I think there's a more complicated issue because I think what this is doing.
No, I think
set frame goes to all.
In each of those graphics.
No, just on graphics grid.
Oh, that I'm sure will be recti. What the heck happened there? Oh, I see. So one of the issues here is that the width isn't the same necessarily for all of them, right? Oh, it is there. There, it's making. Are those identical or not?
What was that change that just happened?
Well, he has the random inside the thing, so every time he reevaluates it.
Oh, okay.
But what I'm surprised by is why that last column isn't narrower. See what I'm saying?
Yes.
Because I'm pretty sure we had that.
So that means it's not per column taking the max width.
Well, I thought that it was. I'm very confused by this. I thought that there is an option to grid, which is an equalization option.
Is that an item size somehow?
Well, here, look. There is a... Why does this... That's a bug in this version, right?
It's reported.
Okay, so there is an option. What is it called? I thought there was an option that was called something like equal sizes or some such other thing.
It's not ringing any bells to me.
That determines whether a grid is forced to have is whether it's basically forced to do this or not. Get what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Because I think a grid here, if we let's give these image size. Well, that's not going to help, is it? Image size.
It's an item size, I think.
That okay. So let's see. I see. Width and height of each item. That's what I'm thinking of. Make all items the same width and height. That's the point, right? So the question is how item size works in graphics grid. Okay, so item aspect ratio is automatic.
Yeah, I think item size support for graphics grid is really what we want, and once that's implemented,
Yes.
then we have the control over to what extent things are allowed to stretch.
Right, but the default, I think, should be that they are of equal height in a graphics row and of equal width in a graphics column.
Okay.
Okay. All right. So, okay, so I'm going to let you ponder that and come back with issues about it. Fair enough?
Sounds good.
Okay, so let's go back now to the to your list line plot options here.
Right, and we know about the frame.
Yeah, right. Okay, so what were we talking about last time? We were talking, among other things, about the labeling and where that goes.
Right, and this is where I think we want Jeremy.
Okay, is Jeremy here?
He should be gettable.
Okay, could somebody...
Yeah, I'll try, Stephen. One second.
Okay, by the way, we have a comment from our live stream here about a case that is being claimed to be broken. Okay, so let's take a look at this. So, fails to determine the optimal size of graphics within sets. Oh, wow. Well, yeah. Wow, that's pretty bad. I mean, is that the same problem or is that a different problem?
That is, I think, a different problem. And that is... I mean, I think that's a problem where it has trouble determining what the size is reliably.
Well, but why?
But it should be fixable.
Space. Look, most of the space here. I mean, if I say here, frame. I'm not going to have a gutter between those things, am I? No. I mean, in that.
Right. No. I mean, what I mean is that when it sees the legend, it doesn't know essentially what the aspect ratio is.
It's a different issue. See this white space here? Something is fluffing out the aspect ratio, and it's the same problem we're seeing here. See? Wherever that went. When I clicked on that, right? The bounding box that you get is a fluffed out bounding box, right? As opposed to a tight bounding box to the actual content. Okay?
And right.
That's presumably what's wrong. Now, again, in the,
Well, so can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Okay, so if you look at that last column of the black and white,
Yep.
Second from the bottom is the widest rectangle.
Yep.
Okay, so what, depending on the setting for item size,
Yep.
you're expecting that when you select that rectangle, you get an orange box that's tight to that rectangle.
That's what I'm expecting. So if I copy paste, let's take a look at this. See, this is something really bizarre. Let's say I copy that and I copy it out. Oh, that's just friggin' weird. How could that have happened? What is it doing?
I
am deeply.
mean, so it may. I'm not sure. I mean, it could be on how.
Oh, look at that. So that thing, which I didn't give it an aspect ratio.
Yes, you did.
Yes, you did.
Oh, yes, I did. I'm sorry, I did. Yes, I did. Excuse me. Okay, but so somehow this thing here, the selected graphic isn't what I actually get out, which is totally weird.
I'm wondering if when you click on that rectangle on the inside, if it's showing somehow the extent of the inset that it's inside of.
That could be.
So if you click it once,
somehow.
Okay, so now click it a couple more times.
Ah. You're right, but then when I copied it, it didn't copy the inset, which is correct. You're right. So this is inside an inset.
Right. And it's making sure that all the insets are the same width within that column, so that
which is probably the correct thing to do for the grid, but is not the correct thing to do for the row.
Right. I mean, the row insets all need the same height still, but
well, the row insets aren't all the same height. That's the problem that we have.
Well, no, I mean they need to be.
Yes.
Right. And I suspect that they actually are all the same height.
Well, let's find that out. We've got a graphics row here. Let's regenerate it. That's just so frigging weird. Okay, so that thing, for some crazy reason, because it thought it was it had some kind of atavistic notion of its ancestors in the grid, but it thought it was in a grid somehow, which it obviously isn't, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that inset is incorrectly computed for the. It had a wide inset which just shouldn't be there.
Right.
Now, but let's try to generate again something which. Come on, why are these aspect ratios always okay? So that one is okay. So that one, again, that one has an incorrect inset, so we can drill it, and then we get down to that.
What should happen here, though? I mean, how wide should a given item be before it stops growing in width?
Yeah, it's a good question. It probably needs a constraint on that.
Yeah.
Right. I think I have placing the code where it's plus or minus a factor of 10 or something.
I'm not sure 10 is. I think 4 is probably better.
Okay.
But I agree that probably needs to be a parameter in graphics row. I would think that should say. I mean, item aspect ratio seems to be a control that determines that, and the question is, what's the
Well, you want variable aspect ratio, but maybe a max put on it.
Right. I mean, can you open the notes? The notes are completely useless.
What's that? Yes. I mean, it could have an up to or something like this.
Yeah.
Where up to 5 means 1/5 to 5 or something.
Bleh. Yeah. Interval. What about interval?
I mean, interval is what I was thinking initially.
No, I think that would be good. That the default is interval 1/5 to 5 or something. That represents, adapt it within those bounds. All right. Okay.
Okay.
Let's review this again. But I really would love to see this fixed. Gosh, this is. I mean, that's a particular project I happen to be doing right now, which is full of these graphics rows, and I'm really kind of shocked that they didn't work. Okay.
Okay. So now we have the other things for.
Okay.
Jeremy's.
So let's go back. Let's go back to multi-panel plots. Okay. So if I change the aspect ratios here, can I do that? If I say in these aspect ratio automatic.
Are you running a prototype build, first of all?
Yeah, let's use proto.
Okay, actually, this we just someone from our live stream just pointed out another.
It looks the same.
Well, they claim it's going to be more horrifying still. So let's just see.
How big's that table? 5 by 5. What if it's taking
time.
so long?
Maybe it's the contour plots.
That shouldn't be. Those don't look too exotic.
Maybe it's the optimization in the graphics grid.
Probably.
Hopefully not. This is really strange. Do you have the? Oh, ay.
What the heck?
That is what? What do we have there? So we have random plot labels, random axes and frames.
Oh, I see. It mixes every. It's really made to be as non-uniform with stuff.
Yes, but the problem is that it's obviously cutting off the labels. It is. When is it legending there? Plot legend.
I suspect that if it didn't have any legends, it would look fine.
Well, but the point is, the complaint here is legends are being all randomly cut off.
I don't know if we understand why that is, but I expect it's the same old problem of not being able to know sizes. That wasn't.
Yes, but that's a good bug case. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let's go back over here. So if these are different, what do these do if they're different aspect ratios?
They normalize.
So first of all, in this case, list line plot doesn't allow for different aspect ratios. And I don't.
Even if I say aspect ratio to automatic? Because it's got different data, remember?
I mean, so it has different data, but it doesn't. This first version of within list line plot doesn't allow individual addressability of options.
I understand that, but if I said aspect ratio to automatic, would that just what would it do for the individual panels? What aspect ratio would it assume for the individual panels?
Well, automatic has a concrete meaning.
Well,
yeah, so it's the same. If you do automatic for one, if you plot them all curves in the same plot, automatic has a meaning.
Yeah. Okay, so let's take a look at what this does.
It's probably going to be really.
What did that do?
You're not in your prototype build.
The prototype build seems kind of confused, but anyway, let's try here.
So you should get like 3 really skinny things stacked on top of each other. Whoa! Plot layout goes to...
All right, let's try this.
Try a concrete aspect ratio.
Well, I just try it without. Okay,
yeah.
dandy. Okay, so now you say... Okay, so I think you've got a plain Jane bug there.
The automatic case, yes.
But I think what it should do is to use the same automatic as if you plot them all in one frame.
Mm-hmm.
The case we're shipping now.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah, it should look like 3 copies of that one, and they.
it's got to take the union of all the points to determine the because the scales have to agree.
Yes.
Take the union of the points. So if one of them was just down in a corner, tough luck. That's all you'll see.
Right.
Yep.
So in a future iteration, we might be able to do something more elaborate where it's kind of more like the variable width striping of a what can one call it? A Pinterest type output. As opposed to this case where they're all fixed, they're all the same width.
Right.
What was the Pinterest comment?
Well, because that's an example where the widths are fixed, but the heights are not.
I see. Okay.
Right, and they don't form a grid. And actually, we don't have. Okay, let's actually comment on that for a second.
So I was going to say, are we going to look at Pinterest?
No, we don't need
to. But the other thing,
right.
Stephen, we had this long discussion of when do you allow for individual controls, when we take multiple data in a single plot function, and when do you use show or graphics grid and other means of combining? And I think that we put a limit on how complicated we make the option structure.
Yes.
Go, and then if you're outside of that range, then you do them individually and combine, because then you have all the flexibility.
Right. So I just want to come back to the quotes Pinterest comment. Okay, Jeremy, we've used in a bunch of websites and things. We've used that methodology, haven't we?
We have. I think multi-column would get you there, though. So you could do multi-column of a list of graphics, 4, and you would basically get that effect, but it would be in columns, not rows.
Okay, so what you're saying is, if I take, oops, oh my gosh, wow, this thing is really killing it. Do I need to save this file?
I've got a screenshot of it, and that input's in the chat on Twitch anyway.
Right.
I guess what you don't get is you'd have to constrain the width yourself.
Okay, so in this case here, you're saying here, we could say, on this, we could say multi-column.
Yeah, but you'd have to set a width. Otherwise, it's going to be a mess.
It wants a list as input, not.
Oh, you have flattened or something. Yeah.
Okay, that is officially not a satisfactory situation because that didn't resize those images, right?
I mean, multi-column is still constructing a grid.
Okay, but I believe we need this functionality, and I don't think it should be graphics grid.
And so what you want here is you want the, even with columns that pack densely vertically.
That's correct. Knowing that there will be raggedness at the bottom.
Right. Can image collage do that?
Don't know. I don't think so. So I mean, we want both cases probably. We want the horizontal case and the vertical case.
Mm-hmm.
The horizontal case, the vertical case is probably more common.
Yeah, probably.
All right, so that if you can come up with, I don't know what we call it. We call it graphics multi-column, probably.
Or something involving pack, or
I would say graphics multi-column because it is the multi-column functionality.
And
but it's not really the multi-column functionality. I mean, because multi-column, if you look inside that cell, near the top, almost certainly there's going to be a grid box.
Well, in the case of, okay, but I think conceptually, okay, that would be my first take on it, is that that's essentially what it is, like graphics row, graphics column. I mean, graphics multi-column is the natural way of doing it from graphics column. Now, okay, we can discuss this separately, but
right.
I think that's making the assumption that graphics multi-column is just to add something here to my list. Okay, all right. Let's go back now to this. Okay. All right. So now, what are the questions here?
So the question is, that alternating frame label approach.
It's very exotic.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it's that exotic.
Well, I mean, so the thing is that it's hopefully obvious the problem we're trying to solve.
Well, it's the crashing of the endpoints.
Correct, and there's sort of two approaches to that. One is we take an alternating approach,
mm-hmm.
and the other is we try to avoid the endpoints. So instead of labeling 0 to 20, we only put the ticks for 5, 10, and 15.
I understand. Or increasing the gutter.
Mm-hmm.
Jeremy, what do you think about this alternating solution?
I don't like it at all. It just looks messy to me. I understand the issue. I just don't like the way it looks.
I think you should look at something, let's look at the 3x3 case.
Okay. I mean, by the way, an alternative to this approach would be, lose that.
Yeah.
And potentially lose this, but you always are keeping the global endpoints, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Right.
So, okay, so in a case like this, okay, first question is, in a deep thing with multiple multi-decker creature, should we be labeling the things at the top as well as the bottom?
So change your 520 to 2520 and column 2 to column 5. Oops, wrong front end again.
Is this the right one?
I don't know. I should give you my toolbar.
What does that do? Tells you your version number?
Among other things.
That sounds useful. Put it in the function repository.
It's a lot of internal stuff.
Well, put it in the internal function repository.
Okay.
And give it to me too, because I'd like it. Okay. All right. Oh boy, this is a pretty wild creature. Do you have an option where we could see it crashing?
Try setting frame ticks goes to all. That's probably the best chance of getting it through.
No.
Nope. Okay.
Okay. I just want to understand this meeting structure. So the thing we're trying to figure out here is the stuff about where the ticks go, right?
Mm-hmm.
Are there other things we need to figure out or not?
I think that's the main thing.
Okay, so you've done something with graphics grid here. Is that correct?
Right.
But
Hopefully whatever fix.
I mean, and so what that's doing in that case is it's sort of relying on making sure that all the plots have the same amount of padding.
Okay, and how much padding is that?
It depends on, so for the most part, it's determined by that bottom left one in this case because it has the biggest labels. Mm-hmm. So it's looking at, how much padding does each plot have, and then making sure that things, sort of match that.
Do you have, for example, when you're dealing with units and things like that, is that correctly being factored into all of this?
It should be. I mean, so the units, don't show up in the tick labels at the moment. They get shown as axis labels or.
I understand. I'm asking you in the multi-column and multi-panel case. Where do they go? Do they go at the top of the whole? Where do they go in the framed multi-panel case?
So it's probably. I mean, if it's so for like list plot, it's going to be all the same. For every plot, and so it'll go in once per row, once per column, sort of thing.
Where?
I don't remember off the top of my head.
Okay.
I mean, so like plot. If you have labels, like I have a label for this curve, I have a label for that curve, sort of thing. Then recall that they go at the top of each panel, right below the frame.
Can you show me an example?
So if you go back over to if you take a simple like that one of the three list line plots.
Question for you. Sorry, the default plot size. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any sense in having the default plot size increase if you're doing a multi-panel plot? Just like I think for image and for graph, the default plot size increases when you have more nodes, or when you have more content, doesn't it?
No.
For graph, I don't think so.
Okay, it certainly does for image. So if I say table,
I think it can only go smaller. I don't think it can ever go bigger.
Image can be fairly big, I thought.
Yeah, I think image can get big too.
Right, and geographics is bigger by default.
Okay, so I'm going to. So I'm making my case again. So if I say table here, I don't know. Let's say 1.5 to the n. I might need to round that. What the heck? So those all came out the same size.
I don't think that's the image size. I think that's.
Oh, that's not the image size. Sorry. Yeah, there we go.
Right, but if you go big, then.
Yeah, it gets big.
Can you right click on that last one and set it to actual size just to see if it shrunk it? It may. Oh, what?
It shrunk it. There. That one was the
actual size shrunk it?
Well, let's find out what it is. Okay, that seems about right, but why would it have gotten bigger in the list? Let's try going 17 steps. That is odd. I think that's a case for shoddy. By the way, it's an interesting example for the documentation. I'm going to send this. Who should I send this to? Should I send this to Shoddy?
Sure.
Should I run it?
I wonder. So images don't auto shrink inside lists then?
They do, I believe.
Yes, they do.
Yeah, they absolutely do. So something happened here. Okay. Let's come back to your. So what do you say about my possible suggestion of increasing size when there's a multi-panel plot? Is it crazy?
I mean, I think increasing the size is fine. I mean, obviously, we don't want to keep the individual plots at their normal size.
Obviously not. Absolutely not. No. We might want. I mean, a gradual increase is what I'm talking about.
I mean, I think my preference would be for predictability that, so normal plots are like 360 wide, that a multi, if we have multiple columns, that they're allowed to be
500 or something.
500-ish, and
But
that
should it
it's
get bigger
whether it's 2
as the-
columns or 10 columns, it's 500-ish.
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously, if a 360 is the default size for a plot, the minimum, the minimum column number is 2. So, right. I mean, let's take this. Let's just take this one as an example. Okay, and what did it just do? Okay, so the default size, I don't know why this is so slow, is that. Okay, so now let's copy that. And I don't know what we think would be more reasonable, but let's just try. I mean, to my mind, that's more reasonable.
Mm-hmm.
And let's
That's
see what
probably
that is.
about 540.
I'm only mildly impressed. That was 600 roughly.
The ticks threw me off.
How wide is the default window?
Can you do a timeline plot?
Of what?
Yesterday, today. So I believe that size, at least at the time we made it, was just under the widest that would fit in the documentation.
All right. So look, I think the multi-panel plot should go probably to this, 600-ish.
Mm-hmm.
Jeremy, do you have comments on this?
No, I think that's good. Definitely bigger is good.
Right. I mean, so the other thing is that it's going to. I mean, I think it should also constrain vertically.
Sure.
If you have 5 rows.
Yeah, if this aspect ratio is flipped around, you don't want it to go. Well, I don't know what happens with a normal plot. How does that constrain vertically?
So a normal plot, a normal graphic, the default image size is whatever will fit within a 360 by 420 box. 360 wide, 420 high.
Okay, fine. So let's scale this the same way. So it's 600 by
8-ish.
Yeah, that sounds fine to me.
Okay.
Unless the default window is way taller than 800 pixels, right? Assume it is. If it isn't, we talk about it again.
Oh, let me just measure it real quick.
Okay.
This default window has just around 900 pixels on my Mac.
All right. Okay. So fine. So 800 is okay, I think. Jeremy, you want to object?
No, I think that sounds okay.
Okay. All right. So let's go back then. So the remaining issue here is what to do with these labelings. Okay. So first question is, do you have any control of these labelings right now?
Internally, yes. Exposed, no.
Okay.
By the way, I mean, so at the moment, I could relatively easily, drop the 0 and 20.
Could you try that? And I mean, is it possible to do that in real time now and show us what it's like?
I'm not going to try and do it in real time because I think you also have a 3 o'clock meeting. That's
yeah, right, okay.
But I'll put together that and send out a screenshot.
Okay.
But I like your idea of keeping the very extreme 0 and 20.
I think that'll be much more visually obvious to people.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm a little concerned, Jeremy, can you comment on just the amount of noise associated with having all of those numbers on the sides of these plots?
You're thinking just weed them out and only have a few?
Well, no, I'm saying, okay, so one possible strategy would be, the question is if this is labeled, this is labeled, this is labeled, it's like it's numbers the whole thing is just drowning in numbers.
But is
Right,
the
so-
range always the same? I mean, might it vary between rows?
In this case, for version 12, the range is always the same.
Oh, okay.
Let me ask the question. Actually, somebody on the live stream is asking about supporting multiple axes on plots.
That's another
Not
project.
for 12.
I understand, but I'd like to know, it's relevant to this discussion. What is the design theory for that?
We
The
need
design theory is that you will get, so if you have two such things, one will go on the left, one will go on the right.
Right, but is it effectively a plot layout? Because it's basically putting two curves, two plot layout is basically superimposed.
right. Sure, but there's some issues. You need to be able to identify your axis and your curve together.
Absolutely.
Okay.
How do
And-
people usually do that? They do it in a stupid way. They just
Usually with color, or you can even have a selector.
no, but often I see that with a blue curve and a green curve or something, but they don't. There's nothing in the plot itself that
A
identifies.
lot of times people do it badly. And they just have, like you say, two different color curves, and
you kind of just have
one
to know that
is-
one of them is in BTUs and the other is in feet or something.
right, and you have to sort of deduce which curve is which.
Yeah, that's completely crazy. Do you have a better idea?
Well, you can also style them so the axis is styled the same way the curve is.
But that's going to be ridiculous too. I mean, if
Well,
you have a
I mean,
green
Depends on whether, you don't necessarily have to style the entire axis. I mean, you could have, a little color swatch, at the bottom or something.
So, for example, in the place where you might have an axis label, you have an axis swatch. Is that a good
Something
idea?
like that.
That's not crazy.
I mean, I don't know that I've seen anybody do it that way, but I think you
I've
ought to be able to
certainly
come up with
seen-
some
I've
really
certainly
nice swatching.
Yeah, but I've certainly seen the sort of styling of axes, and not necessarily the labels, but the axis.
Or
You
the
mean
ticks
with
match or
dotted and
something.
dashed, or what are you thinking?
Sorry.
What kind
Oh, I
of
was
styling?
thinking color primarily, because
Of
the
the
other
whole
thing,
axis.
yes,
Or part of the
Lovely.
axis. The ticks.
we
not
can
the labels, but
we can experiment with variety of things there. The other thing that I've
Jeremy, do you
seen,
have a sense of that? I mean, that just seems incredibly ugly to have color ticks that match the color of because you've got
maybe
gray
not
or
the
black.
ticks, but the axis.
I just think that's incredibly ugly to have the whole
I mean,
axis be
there are
colored.
certainly cases where, generally speaking, people have done things where the label colors match the.
Yeah, the label
Plot
as
style.
a legend is. I like that idea. Then you
Yeah.
could encode dashing if you want.
So what that's trying to leverage is this, an identification legend. It allows you to match two things that are apart.
Right, but I mean, basically, what that's saying is, if you legend it or default, if you don't have a legend, if you don't have an axis.
I'm saying
label-
the axis plays the same role as a legend. It's an additional.
Yes,
piece of-
I get it. I get it. But I
Okay.
mean, so I think what we're tentatively saying is, what we want is to have a swatch of color that shows that this axis is associated with this curve, this axis is associated with that curve.
And that may very well work out well because that's more subdued. It's not as
Yeah,
extreme. But I think we should implement the other case too. I think
Fair
that
enough,
might
fair
be,
I don't know whether
for showcasing in a presentation, that's probably the better way to go.
right. Is this y-axis only, or is this x-axis and y-axis? And I'm going to bring the next question: a multi-panel plot that has multiple. Okay, so a multi-panel plot could have the situation that the right labeling is different from the left labeling.
I think eventually you're going to get into graphics grid where you sort of bundle what you're seeing here are very efficient layouts. Once you
Well,
break,
I understand, but I'm saying that consider that case where everybody has two curves on them, right? A left curve and a right curve, and I'm saying the rightmost, axis, the rightmost frame is labeled for the, the right referencing curve, and the leftmost frame for the left referencing curve.
maybe.
I mean,
I
it
think
would
you're-
probably possible, but at some point, your specification.
Well, that specification wouldn't be what's happening there is that you're superimposing the I mean, plot layout could be called double axis. That would be one, right? So the question is, if you give 3 curves and the plot layout is double axis, what do you do? Basically, what you have to do.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't call it double axis. And what it would do is you would get, an extra axis to the right.
Well, no, you get the frame. Are you talking an axis or a frame?
I mean, you would get an extra scale. To the axes and frames are both scales. That you would have, numbers on the left frame, numbers on the right frame, and then either to the left or the right, you would have another vertical line that, identified, what range of numbers you're looking at for that third curve.
Okay. Well, I'm not okay. Our live stream points out the curves could be spatially biased towards one axis or the other. That's an interesting case where there's essentially overlap, where there are points that go to the right, where the left curve, the left referencing curve, doesn't have points for high X values.
Sure. But that's a question of what you want. Do you want comparability or not? Do you want direct visual comparability?
Yeah.
That's what you have now.
Right.
Now you have visual comparability. If you adapt and change the scales all the way around, you can have it on a per row basis maybe, or but then you don't have visual comparability. You have to drill deeper. You have to parse deeper in the dashboard.
I get it. But this point about how you can end up with a situation where if you have 2 curves, I mean, I think what we have to do is basically in the specification, it's like saying whether a curve goes with the left axis or the right axis. Okay, let's. I think the thing to try. I think we should try this thing where, look, to my mind, we should probably have some named cases of these things, and we want the okay, we probably want the alternating labels. We probably want the pruned,
the interior labels.
Right. Now, there's another case, I would argue. So I'm concerned that if you put all of the numbers around this, that it's going to look stupid. And for example, do you put the numbers in the little inset-y thing here?
For the pruned one, where we're not doing alternating, I would expect that one to get
some numbers.
So okay. Whatever's on Jeremy, the left and whatever's on the bottom.
Jeremy, do you think that if we put in so many numbers that it's just going to look stupid?
It's hard to answer because right now they all match and maybe it's repetitive, but as soon as the ranges are going to match.
They are going to match, Jeremy.
But they are going to match in this case. Graphics Grid has a ton of things where they cannot match, but there's a lot more sort of conforming to do to make it look.
Okay.
Right. So in this case, they will always match. And so I would like to suggest an alternative. Okay. My alternative would be label only the corners, the outer corners somehow. In other words, just label, don't try to label every, label essentially a prototypical plot. So for instance, I even might argue for labeling this plot. By the way, these should have ticks. There's no justification to not have ticks. Okay, and so I'm arguing for a case where you essentially are labeling a fiducial plot, but nothing else.
And then everything else you just assume.
You just tick it, so to speak.
That's a pretty decent idea. That's sort of very minimal.
Very minimal.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's try these cases, and we can give an option. What would the option be? that, I mean, is it a plot layout option, or what is this?
I mean, probably my first approach on it would be a method option.
Okay, fine. That's probably the right thing for right now. Okay, we have a few comments on the live stream, and then we need to wrap this meeting.
Yep.
One comment is option to display axis or show axis as I hover a mouse over the specific plot. Yes, for sure. Yeah, right. On hover, you can absolutely light up the axis.
Right.
Well, exactly. That's part of another thing for multi-axis too, that you want to be able to do, that when you hover over a curve, the axis that's relevant to that curve lights up.
Sure, definitely. But there are many applications where people print the thing where that isn't a possibility.
Mm-hmm.
We also have an example here where apparently there's trouble with graphics grid and some performance issue. So maybe you can look at that.
Okay, and the examples in the chat, or
Yep.
I mean in the Twitch.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you all very much. Those who are paying attention to live streams, we have a live stream about game theory coming up soon. Okay, see you all soon.
See ya. Bye.